Hi, we're going to try this a different way, I guess. So I'm not sure what happened with the audio in the class, and I don't know if it's my computer or if it's the video audio connection or what, but it's been bad. Like, I watched the video of the lesson plan today and it was really hard to watch, really hard to understand. So I'm going to re-record this, and hopefully it's going to be shorter. It's 15 minutes versus that 40 minutes before. So I'm going to try and get everything I said before, re-say it again into a smaller package. So hopefully you'll be able to listen to this one at least. So what we talked about was lesson plans. Those of you who work in a school may have seen thousands of lessons plans before. Those who haven't, there's a million of them out there. What we're using today is a kind of a pre-canned template for a lesson plan. And whatever your school decides, like how you have to turn lesson plans in, that's what you're going to follow. Your third and fourth year for college, though, every university has adopted different types of lesson plans, and then that's what you do for your third and fourth year. Dickinson has one, MSU has one, Havre has one, U of M has another one, and they're all similar but not exactly the same. So I'm going to show you a pretty basic generic one, and then we're going to kind of go through it and kind of talk about what we did in class today. Make my face smaller here. There we go. So this lesson plan starts with a grade. So you pick the grade level, and then CCSS, which means Common Core State Standards. Your plan date, and then if it's a final or if it's your rough draft. The example that we went through today is that I asked the students, like, what grade level should we pick? And so we decided on 10th grade. After 10th grade, we need to go about what are we teaching in 10th grade, and we decided history or social studies. And so what we're doing is we're going to go to the Common Course Standards, and where do you think we need to find those? You got it, OPI. So we go to the OPI website and we look up the standards. And the standard that we picked was SSG 912.5. What that means is SS means social studies, G means geography, and 9-12 means 9th grade through 12th grade. .5 means the 5th standard. So you're welcome to look that up, but that's what we did in class. We picked high school, 10th grade, history, found the common course numbering, so it's SS.G 9-12.5, and that's our common course standard. Of course, the date is today, and this is going to be our rough draft. And then we figured out our goals and objectives. If you remember when we talked the last video, on the back of the board we had goals, standards, and objectives, and our goals is like our big ideas, the big thing we want our students to know, like everybody will, all of our students will, something large and broad. That's our goal. So our goal here was we want to be able to teach migrating, we were going to teach history of ancient civilizations and how they changed positions on the continents millions of years ago. And so we thought what we would do is the goal would be like everyone or all students will know the difference of continent areas, prior continent areas, I can't remember the exact words we used, and then showing the migration of how people migrated, cultures migrated throughout the country. Okay, so that was our goal, and our objective was going to be the students will be able to. So students will be able to, and we decided what we would do is like have a map. We would have a map of what the globe and the earth looks like now, a map of the earth and different continents, and then what the continents looked like millions of years ago, and how the different cultures moved from place to place. So we wanted to label the maps, the current and the former, and we wanted to make sure we had the different types of cultures that we were talking about labeled on the maps. So that was our objective. So students will be able to label 2 maps and then go from there. So we kind of also thought, well, that objective is a great assessment. So if we go back to our lesson plan here, and we can fill in right as our assessment right in here. So our objective is going to be students will be able to label the maps that show the migration of different ancient cultures. Great. So that's your assessment. That's how I know that people are going to be doing what I'm asking them to do and understanding what I'm asking them to understand. Then we looked at our 3 to 5 key points. So what are we going to mainly talk about? So I think we picked 4 in class today. And our main one was like vocabulary. We're going to have to make sure our students know the vocabulary that I'm talking about. So if they didn't even know what a continent was, remind them, show them. Maybe they've forgotten. Maybe they were never taught. Doesn't matter. Go through so everybody's starting at the same spot. Those who already know it, it's a great review. Those who didn't know it will know it now. So we had vocabulary. We had the names of the continents. That's something else you need to talk about. We need to talk about how do we know ancient civilizations have even traveled or migrated because of artifacts, right? So how do we find artifacts? How do we what are they? And those type of things. So the word artifacts was on there as well. And you're also going to have to talk about like ancient cultures. Like what does that mean? And so that's all of the key words that we're going to be hitting on. So continent, vocabulary words, labeling, artifacts, all the things that we needed to teach. So that was our key points. And then the opening, I kind of let this open, and we decided as a group the opening might be really cool to have a video. So if we use like a documentary video on artifacts, or if we had some type of documentary where somebody is digging up maybe it's like maybe like arrowheads or teapots or something to show that there was a culture in that area. So we thought maybe looking at National Geographic, maybe they have something, maybe they've got something in the History Channel, something that's going to spur the interest of students. Like maybe we didn't even know that there was people living here, like where we are right now in Montana, before we came. I mean, we have quite a bit of Native American studies in our high school, so hopefully a lot of students would know that. But maybe they're not aware that there was people all the way across the world that had a lot of history before we even had our modern times here. So we would talk about artifacts, and so we would look at a video that might spur interest on artifacts. One of the suggestions in class was to show a movie, and I think I have to be really cautious about showing a movie at the beginning of a lesson plan because that's going to be extended time. But, totally up to you as a teacher, whatever you decide. I think short video clips are a great way to get students excited about this because that's basically what we're doing. We're wanting the students to get excited about this. So our opening is sometimes called an anticipatory set, and that just means like how are we going to get our students excited about what we're talking about and moving forward. All right, and so then we talked about the introduction of new materials. Like, how do we teach new materials? There's a couple different ways we thought about it, but we have decided the first thing that they were going to do is they're going to do a quiz, like a vocabulary quiz. Like, how much do you already know about it? So maybe do a Kahoots. And the idea would be is that you probably are not going to know a lot the first time around, and then we're going to do an activity or like a quick lesson or like read something or do something more to find out about those answers, and then at the end of the class period take the Kahoots again and see how many points you scored higher. It was just something kind of fun and entertaining to keep students engaged. The next one after the introduction to new material is guided practice. Like, how are we going to help students work through the big information on their own? So one of the suggestions our students had is give them a PowerPoint and then walk through, because we've already had something fun. We had the audio and the video, the clip, we had a game, we had some kind of competition, personal competition for themselves, like what you scored before, learn something, what you scored afterwards. But now we have to kind of get to the meat and potatoes of what we're teaching. So a PowerPoint is a great way to do that. And maybe, these are our sophomores now, maybe we require notes. Maybe we can bring in some language arts and some writing objectives and standards and like work on writing notes. Then at the end, we're kind of working through that material together, maybe a lot of discussions, maybe asking new questions, finding out new answers together. That's going to be the guided practice where you're working with the students learning this new material. The independent part, how are you going to clearly state the model of behavior, the expectations of what's going to happen when they're doing it on their own? So one of the suggestions is that we had is that on that PowerPoint, maybe what we do is we leave empty blank PowerPoints, like slides, and break into groups. So like you 3 students work on Asia, you 3 students work on North America, you 3 students work on Russia, whatever it is. And so you look at the I guess I didn't use Russia as an example, use Australia because we do have an Australian student in our class. And so we would like look at what changed during that continent, and then they were to add information to that PowerPoint. And so then we would put their slides in with the master PowerPoint slide, and they would be part of the presentation. That would be the independent work. Even though we did decide maybe it's small group, it's still something that the teacher is backed off from, not working with the student with. They're working it on their own, but yet they still have ownership on what's going on in the class. So we thought we would add that. And then also, for the closing, we would also include the students. So at the end of the lesson, sometimes teachers will just say, okay, so today we learned blah, 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 blah. One suggestion that might work with this is how about we have the students write questions to a test. And I've done this before in 7th and 8th grade when I was doing 7th and 8th grade language arts, and it was kind of fun. So at the end of the lesson, whether the lesson takes 1 or 2 or 3 days, depending on our time and how fast we kind of go through things, at the end of that lesson, say, okay, so if you were to write a test on this, what were some questions you would ask your friends? And they would write them down. And of course, they would turn them into you as the teacher, and then you would look at the questions like, did they really understand what you were trying to get at? And if they were quality questions, actually use them in the test. That would be kind of fun for the students to actually write part of the test, so they can go through the test and like they know the answer to this question because they wrote that question. I think anytime that you are looking at does a student know something, it doesn't have to be a test. It can be test questions. It can be, an assignment on a group project, something fun, a conversation. It can be formal. It can be informal. However you want to do this. So that was something that we just talked about in class today, that would be a good kind of fun closing. Everybody would write a question to the test, and whether you actually give a test or not, totally up to you. We could go back and use the assessment that we talked about earlier when you're just having the maps of having a label of maps. So you think, this lesson right here might, if you're in a traditional high school, it might take 3 to 4 days to get through all of this. If you have block scheduling, it might take less time. But at the end, and you've done the audio, video, we've done the new material with the games and the vocabulary words. We worked on PowerPoints together. We took notes. We did independent practice. We added PowerPoint slides to our class PowerPoint, and then we had the students write part of their own test together. Then if I give them a map and say, okay, this is what we're talking about today, you can either do it independently, do it together as a group, maybe it's a homework project, however you want to do that as the instructor. If your students come back and can fix or label that map correctly with the peoples and the ancient cultures that we just talked about, then we know that they've got that information. So that is what we talked about today in class. Obviously, I went through that a heck of a lot faster than if it was in real class time. But the idea is the same, is that we're trying to get a plan out, because it's really not effective if you're going into a classroom just kind of winging it. Like, oh, I'm just going to give this a try and see what happens. That's not the best that you can give to your students, and so we really want to make sure what we're doing is the most effective teaching that we have. So once we have that done, that's part of a lesson. And when we're going to get together on Tuesday, what we're going to talk about is how do we get lessons into units. And units are the larger spots of maybe a semester or a quarter long, or less than that if you're doing younger classes for sure. But if we're talking specifically about the sophomore class of history that we're talking about, it's going to take longer, so a quarter or a semester of a unit. How does this lesson fit into that bigger unit? So we're going to be going over units on the 15th, and then on the 17th we are not going to have class. I don't have it written on our schedule, so hopefully we kind of know that ahead of time, and I did announce it in class today, so that's that. All right, I hope this video turns out better than my last one. Thanks.